So to get started with pencil portraits, we are going to need first your drawn, gridded portrait of yourself. Go ahead and erase all the grid marks to get them out of the way. Then you're going to need this. This is blending stump, tortillon, or smudge stick. They are very helpful. Grab yourselves a few different types. You can also just use some paper towels wrapped around your finger. Then, of course, you're going to need pencils. I recommend a couple different types, a lighter one and a darker one, an eraser. And then this is your super special secret weapon. It is an eraser with a retractable tip. It is very small. It's going to get all those nice highlights that you want. So first thing that you want to do is you want to isolate the areas that you're drawing. I recommend working like eye, nose, forehead, mouth, like work them as individual things first so you can get a better idea of what you're working with. Just remember, the worst thing that can happen is you have to start over, so don't really worry about it too much. But what I'm doing here is I'm starting with my lighter pencil and I'm angling it so like the side of the pencil is the thing making contact with the paper, never the tip. The tip's not very helpful with this. So I'm going to put down a layer of where I think the darkness is first, and then I'm going to use the blending stump to smooth that out. And honestly, that's it. Do that a lot forever. Some things that'll help you along the way is once you do that first layer, you might go, hey, that's not exactly what I want. Good. Self-critique's a very important thing, even outside of art. But go ahead and take maybe your darker pencil and bump up those darker areas. I will say, whenever you're drawing something from a black and white image, they're always darker than you think, so don't be afraid to kind of go for it. I will say the fact I didn't shade in the eye first before doing around the eye makes this super frightening, but what are you going to do? But after I put in the darkness, I added, with the drawing stump, I kind of blended it around until you can get something that's kind of smooth. Then we can go back with our eraser and start erasing away some of the extras. Now, that is called a reductive technique. So since we added something to the paper, when we erase it, we are reducing it or through a reductive process, removing it. So it takes both types. I know personally, I like to just put a bunch of graphite down on the paper and then just start moving it around using an eraser. Some people, that doesn't really work for them, so you have to kind of find what works perfect for you. Now, as you move into that eyeball, I want you to pay close attention to the whites of the eyes. Bit of a misnomer, right? Because there's still shade inside of there. If you leave the whites of the eyes bright white, it's going to look freaky. Like, I don't know how to describe what it'll look like. Just go ahead and try it. Go ahead and shade in your iris first and then go back. So when you're working with the iris, remember where you have your highlights at. It's always a good idea to keep those nice and bright. So the best way to do that is to not touch it at all. And then go ahead and you can start blending out. I like to do these things just like the outside of the eye. It's all in layers. Start with the lighter pencil, blend it out. Go to the darker pencil, blend it out. Add a little bit more darkness into it. Looking pretty good. There's a lot of repetition to this, so you're going to need to just kind of get comfortable with what works for you. Don't forget your eyelashes. Even if you feel like you don't have very full eyelashes, trust me, you do. Make sure to draw them. Now, something that is going to really help you out is what you did a little bit earlier. Since you gridded this, your face should be pretty symmetrical, or at least as symmetrical as your face is in real life. But that should help you out with this next part. Whenever you're drawing the face, even if your face isn't very symmetrical, you still want things to look pretty symmetrical, and that will really come down to value ranges. Now, you want your value ranges to match pretty equally, even if there is like harsh shadows on one side of the face, because when we look at stuff, if it doesn't visually make sense to us as the viewer, it will look like, a burn victim or something, which is fine if you're drawing somebody that's a burn victim, but if you're not, that's probably not ideal. So make sure your values are matching pretty equally throughout the face. So your eyes should be pretty similar value range wise. So it's important to kind of follow your steps as you go here of starting with a lighter pencil, then a darker pencil. Now what I'm doing here is I'm starting to shade the forehead, and this actually comes up to something I was talking about, how the value range didn't quite match up with what I wanted, but at first I approached all the eyebrows and got those looking right first. And then once I realized that I didn't really like the value, that's when I took my eraser and started lightening everything up. So it looked like I had a giant crease in my forehead. So as we work on the nose, your nose is weird, right? Because it's just like a thing with no hard edges really to it that just kind of out into the world. So to approach it, I recommend taking those edges that you can kind of perceive, those contour lines, and just shade inward from that. Now that's not ideal. Every nose is different though, so you kind of just view your value ranges based on how you perceive it. Generally speaking though, there's going to be a highlight on the tip of the nose, and where the nostrils start is going to be a darker part of the nose. So as long as you abide by that, you should be good. And then a lot of people have, creases up towards the top of their nose. When I said before to make a face whenever you're doing these portraits, it's actually to make things a little bit easier because they can just look a little bit better. I'm not saying you have a boring face or anything like that, but you might. Now, same thing as before, value needs to be equal between sides. Smooth it out. You'll see this is something I'm running into a lot throughout this actually. Where I erased on the grid lines was catching a lot more value. I'll talk more later about how to fix that. Now as you're working on the mouth, it's important to note that nothing should be too harsh on it. The very top of the lips maybe, but never the outside, and definitely never the teeth. There's nothing really I can say special about shading the lips. Just follow kind of the contour of what's there. But whenever you're working on the teeth, make sure you don't draw each individual tooth. You're going to look slack-jawed, which is, what I look like a lot of the time. But again, it's not ideal. We're drawing a portrait of somebody to make them look good. So pay attention to whenever you're working on the teeth. Now, if you have a mustache, beard, facial hair, these actually all still kind of apply the same. I like to put down a layer first of value and then blend it out. And then I'll go in with my darker value. I think I'm using a 4B pencil on this, and I'll start making darker strokes, more contrast to it, right? And then I'll blend that a little bit as well, kind of go back and forth, use the erasers, blend, make things strong. And I don't know, that's really all I can say about it. Each feature on the face you want to believe is more difficult to do than the previous one, and it's really not. They're all the exact same process. So even talking about hair, what we're going to do first is we're going to put down a layer of value using the side of the pencil again. Blend it all out. And then once you start smudging it, you'll get more of a more neutral tone between all of it, and that's when you can add in more of your darker value ranges to it. And here is what I was talking about before. As it's blending, it's starting to make grid marks, which is not ideal. You can just kind of slightly erase those and work around them. But in the future, to get rid of those, you want to erase your whole paper. Like just erase the whole paper, because that kind of creates a grease residue on the paper to begin with. And that makes it so everything's even. I did it on the other side of the head, and you can see how the other side of the head looks fine. But it's just, frustrating when you're 3 hours into a video that you're recording and everything goes terribly. So when you've accepted your fate that these grid lines are just going to be part of your life from here on out, go ahead and just shade the rest of the hair. Shorter hair, this is going to be a lot easier. Longer hair, a lot more difficult because there's just a lot going on. It's a lot more real estate here. But whatever, it's all going to look good. Now, one thing to pay attention to as you're doing this is you're not drawing the individual hair like I showed at the top. You're drawing like little chunks, little clumps of hair. And we do this because if you draw each individual hair, it's just going to look like someone has string for hair. And no one has string for hair except for like Cabbage Patch Kids. But you're not them. You're a person. So draw your hair chunky. You can go in individually using the eraser and using the pencil to kind of lighten up areas and give the impression of individual strands of hair. But I want you to think of your hair as being thick, all right? When you're done, revel in the glory that is you. Give yourself a nice pat on the back. and then just relax. See you next time.